Okay then. Hello everyone, and I hope you have a very, very good afternoon. Some people know me from other events maybe and People First Talks. So today it will be a mix of a lot of things. It will be not only deep dives in architecture, open source, why open source, but looking at how to successfully implement something that takes AI, but spoiler alert, 97% of it is plumbing. So the platform engineers' work is 97% of it, and that's what made it work. So that's spoiler before there's no AI magic. It's still plumbing. And a lot of human things. So we talk about the human foundation and the automation paradox. I guess all of our automation values should go high, but at some point you hit the peak where lifecycle management took over. Then we're going to architecting the agentic organization as such. Imagine OpenClaw, just enterprise grade, traceable reasoning, auditable, versionizable, IDE-able, something like that. And then the platform engineer's missing link. So what ties it together? What makes sense? A sovereignty blind spot because of actually where I work. That is quite a challenge. We have 903 companies, 100% dollars, and 3,400 shares in other companies. So that's quite a big thing. And maybe you know Volkswagen from cars, but that's just a part of it. You know, the group is way, way bigger. And then open source as the foundation. How to create, how to move such a huge company into the direction of open source, make it an upstream open source company. How to do that? So the human foundation and the automation paradox is something that is very easily explained with anything that you witness in society or anywhere else. There is no sustainable change without a business case. If you want to change something in your environment, in your world, at home, make it intrinsically motivated so everybody can take a part of the cake. And that's by making it a business case. Otherwise, there's no sustainability, no self-sustainability. There's idealism basically hitting realism at some point. And if you know my other talks, they always focus on the first part. And this, if you transform people first, people-centric, people solve problems. If you transform process first, people satisfy processes because it's their job. You hired them in a role, give them the tools that you procured to actually satisfy a process. And that's what's happening in a company with 670,000 employees very quickly. People from startups, I've been in startups myself, 2 startups actually before joining enterprises. For you guys, that doesn't apply. But for everybody else in a big environment, it does. And the first thing that I did, because context is king in AI, right? You need to context engineer everything. And that's quite a challenge, especially when your context sits in 16-year-old data. But he's not in a good mood anymore because everybody talks to him about his legacy systems. That's not very appreciative to data, right? So I forbade everyone using the word legacy. Call it stable business, because these people brought the company 40 years to where it is now. They made stable business with these systems. They're running. And second of all, I need their context. I need to talk to these leaders and say, how do you do that even? When shit hits the fan, everybody goes to Dieter, you know? Says, yeah, can you please save us? Because he knows everything that's not documented. And that's the context. That's the crown jewels for AI. Context engineering starts with Dieters. Okay? So appreciate your legacy. They're the gold nuggets. First step for AI adoption. And wow, all of a sudden, you have the entire company behind yourself, right? Human foundation. Makes sense. And tribal knowledge. Who's familiar with the term tribal knowledge? Ever heard of it? Big company. Airbus, you do. Tribal knowledge is in siloed organizations. Your silo has your tribal knowledge. The other silo doesn't have it. So beyond silos, you need to exchange something. and you need to do that on a human foundation. Then there's 3 focus groups. AI transformations are not for everyone. You can do like super fancy AI stuff with people who just don't care because they want to write emails and fill out Excel lists. Claude does that very well, as PowerPoint, by the way. Ta-da. But anyway, so we have the capability augmented people. 10% of the company are like that. My favorite example is skin cancer detection. There's nothing better than computer vision systems with high-resolution cameras and size optics that can detect skin cancer or malicious melanoma in your skin. That's capability augmented. Commodity users are the Copilot, MCP users that automate a little easy tasks away, read emails faster, send emails faster. Great, awesome. Not of our interest today. We're talking to the promille. That's not a distillery joke. That's the real number. That's where you want to enable very, very, very capable developers to have their own agentic org. And these are front runners. These are the goal of your people-first transformation. Because what I said before, if you transform process first, process is there to scale upon all the indifferent 80% who change time for money. But there's the 10%, the people that could go to conferences. I consider everyone here in this room the 10%. The front runners, the trailblazers, the people who want to do more, they want to reach goals. And you are all familiar with the automation paradox. At some point, you automate something to a degree in a complex environment that you spend more time life cycling past value creation than create new value. That's when you hit the automation paradox. And that's very painful because it suffocates your team. And why is that? Because we have static elements in our company, in our environments. We have dynamic elements in our environments. The static ones are perfectly fine with scripts. Keep them at script level. Don't make it agentic. Waste of tokens and reliability. The dynamic part fits perfectly to what you understand in the system is dynamic and needs to be reacted upon something that I can't automate because it happens tomorrow, like a CVE or zero-day attack. And let's architect that a little. And I need to run very quickly through all these slides. I brought 48, but I guess we jumped the open source part a little. What means enterprise grade? That's, for everyone, very interesting who works with enterprises. And we do have special needs. And reliability is one of them. I think everybody can share that pain right now. 90% accuracy multiplied in chains. So if you make N8N, agentic chains, which are not agentic per se, which are just multiplied agents, or multiply LLM queries, that's bullshit. Let's please agree upon that. That's probabilistic bullshit, not enterprise grade. Zero reliability in these systems. That's chaos. Then it's a black box as well, and it's probabilistic outputs. So multiplying matrices in the last 10 years of machine learning, we know that, not working. Then we sliced the black box. We made it smaller, in smaller parts, and we still failed. We're now 2021 for the machine learning people, for the data miners. We're 2023 for the people who are like commodity users in AI adoption. But stateless stays stateless. So you still multiply probabilistic systems. We're getting there slowly into this loop thing in the next slide, but the game changer was first of all making stateless stuff stateful. That's it. Put it in a micro VM, in a firecracker, whatever. Wrap it in a Kata container. Make this entity stateful so it has its own operating system and its own memory. So it can be better and better at what it does. That's that part, yeah. It also needs to be isolated, versionized, observable, and resettable. I need to do rollbacks. Otherwise, again, it's not enterprise grade. I can't handle audits on N8N systems. I can't handle audits on probabilistic, non-versionized things. and I have a lot of audits. Also, famous example, because one of our daughter companies, Audi, went very recently into F1. Would you go into a F1 car and like really hit the gas pedal to the metal, and then you get the announcement, by the way, we don't know if the brakes work? How fast would you go? So that's adoption. Everybody who does something without thinking of these things first is literally, in my mind, rapid prototyping. Do something, have fun, never hit production. This will never go into production without governance, security, durability, reliability, and resilience. If you don't have these things like in your DNA from the very beginning, the product is doomed to be a rapid prototype, but never go into production. Never get an audit. And durability and isolation is one thing that we remember. The grounded mind is the other thing. The context engineered is a new paradigm in platform engineering. And obviously, we have a huge organization. And when we go into the digital org chart with OPA, everybody's familiar with OPA, I guess, here, because you handle Kubernetes, cloud native stuff, open policy agent, right? Yeah. So in your human org, you do a lot of RBAC. You have your card, your ID card, you can enter the building. But ABAC is pretty much necessary when you do agentic, because you slice down into very specific functions. You put out your eyes, they can go into this room, your left toe can go into that room. That's ABAC, attribute-based access controls. That's what we need. And we mirror the human organization into the agentic organization, where we have orchestrators, meta agents, sub-agents, spawn agents, and now it gets a little more technical. But as in the human org, we have a head of a function, we have team leads. In the agentic org, we do have orchestration agents, meta agents, and spawn agents, worker agents. And a meta agent is able to be spawned by an orchestration agent with policy enforcement, supervising everything, and checking on the item potency results. And the worker agents are checked by the meta agent independently upon their item potency states. That is the missing link, actually, because we need to understand automation now and ask ourselves, what is automation? And predictability engine, we already said, we need to 100% verify results, item potency, before it passes to the next one. And that's the item potency state that you do through testing, unit testing, Argo CD, drift detection. There's a lot of measures that we already have in software engineering that do these kind of checks, right? Everybody does that on a daily basis, probably 3 times a day, before noon. And the guardrails, they need to be in place, but they're plumbing, they're architecture. And that's where we actually start decoupling in the architecture, the context from the automation. Who knows this quote? Day one is one day. That's when I go to technical development people, and they think they did 95% of the job. And I'm like, well, for me, coming out of operations, you did a solid 3%. But let's keep it that way. Yeah, day 2 is the rest of your life cycle, and also any digital product has a life cycle. So we think of automation as a status quo, turning into a desired state by knowing every step, specifying every step, and executing upon every step. That's cool for scripts, right? Script languages do that. And now the status quo is context. And the knowing, the specifying, and the executing is something that we put into the agentic layer, and all the guardrails into the architecture. That means we can avoid the automation paradox. Day 2 is not suffocating the people who built day 1 anymore. And building the new capabilities upstream, that enables actually to be more resilient, more secure, and at speed. So how do we do that? And you can imagine it also, who work with context graph and knowledge graph databases? Sorry. That's no one? Really? Okay, so, whoa, okay. I need to rethink how I do that now. You're familiar with APIs, right? So parametricized calls where you have the same input on the same line. And if you do the data pool initiatives that our big companies did in the last 10 years, they love to do that, but they always failed due to the complexity most of the time. And that's where you have to harmonize everything first. But when you're pointing to the data and you're respecting the data ownerships of a very complex environment of 4,300 CIOs I have to handle, then you get the idea why that's the only way to handle it actually, is to point at where the data is and then fetch context-oriented, specifically the data that you need. And there's one good example. One Audi A5 has 36 ways of depicting speed. And I was aware of 2, actually, kilometers per hour and meters per second. And the meters per second one is, the latest I heard it was in school and physics. But yeah, 36, but in APIs. So an agent can handle that. He understands the context. He understands why there's a different value and why there's different values associated with it. But the fun part starts in the architecture. So I'm so sorry for that picture. I'm really sorry. This red environment, you know that's your execution environments. That's your Kubernetes stuff. That's what you do the last 10 years, probably since 2017, since EKS launched on AWS, some before. Then there's the cache and queue stuff. It's how you get stuff from A to B, actually, in and out. And there's federated context. And federated context is not harmonized data pools or context. Who's familiar with the concept of federation? Awesome. Oh, that's good. And then there's the skills engine. And that's where the purple part actually collapses into, because we have a tool factory for codification. And that's the part where you, as a meta agent and an orchestrator, orchestrating meta agents, can decide to collapse an agentic organization into codification whenever he realizes he's treating static context. The context is static, not micro-inferenceable. It's best deterministic in scripts or in skills MD or in agent MD, or maybe you create a SaaS offering out of it for the rest of the group of your 4,000 companies, then probably you do an MCP server at some point. But that's where the tool factory and the codification happens, and meta agents can orchestrate to collapse these recursive agentic orgs that are created in the purple recursively. So if you do micro-inference, 15-token micro-inference, it means that you slice something to such a degree, such a small part, where you can 15-token train that part to 100% result or to a significant amount where you do it's called anomaly detection, that you know from security tools probably, if the idempotency state has been reached or not. And if it has been reached, you can actually see that you need to rerun it or inference it or not. And when you do that like 500 times, you can actually see if it's treating with dynamic context or static context. Whenever it's static environments, it can be codified. And then that's where it collapses into a tool, and that's where the human developer owning this agentic org can IDE it. Basically, he can use the artifacts as infrastructure as code, as a skills MD or agent MD or something else. Okay, yeah, the rest is input stuff you're familiar with. Any abstraction layers? What is the color even? Well, the LLM gateway thing, that's the abstraction layer. That's very important to keep yourself up to date and a little bit independent from what's happening on the market. So, from task to org, recursively, very important is what I just explained. You have a desired state, you have the strongest model planning the org, and then agents and meta agents are distributed as an organization that you can IDE within the hierarchies. Every artifact is visible, means you can do, I called it human inference. Philosophically, that's such a wrong term, but you get the idea. You can get to the artifact and change the artifact. And then we still have a very European topic right now, and that's sovereignty in terms of business continuity. It's not good if somebody can switch off something that I run services on. And sovereignty for us, it's not a switch, and it's a decisive factor if you can put something into production or not. And it's a decisive factor for an AI product to actually hit production or not. So this is still something I have to talk about today. And it's not a profile where I have like an average sovereignty score of whatever. No, absolutely not. It's as strong as your weakest link. And I have a different approach as certifications and stuff. I have this approach of foundation operations and AI. And you can look it up on my name.de, like sebastiankister.de. There's all of these resources that I just showed you. It has an Apache 2.0, so if you want to bring that to a client, greet them from me and show them the stuff. Anyway, that's when it comes to certificates. And you have in the agentic layer a huge gap. There's just nothing. There's nothing. Nothing really showing off your actual scores. And regulation also stops before the agentic layer. Because agents and AI, yes, people thought about it. But it's not agentic. Agentic is what I showed you before. And that's still 97% plumbing. Also, MCP servers, very quick one. They are actually where the data goes. Stateless calls are not where the data goes. Data resiliency and data sovereignty is something that I very much distinguish when it comes to open source. We're not talking open data, we're talking open source. So, a couple of incidents that we had when it comes to MCP threats, and also in terms of assessment and security assessments, it always fails at the moment. So we as an enterprise have to take care of it preemptively. And I don't want to stress that thought too much, but all of you know that open source has a couple of principles. You can audit it, fork it, and run it yourself. And we'll repeat that. You can audit it, fork it, and run it yourself. That's sovereignty. That very much is congruent with what open source stands for. And that's where you can do transparent, auditable, and truly sovereign plumbing. Why should we do that? Are you aware that 96% of all commercial software code bases contain to 75% open source software? How that is measured, I show in the next slide. And we jump that part. And that's from Synopsys, OSS RA 2024 study. Right now it's even more, because in the last 2 years we have a strong proprietarization movement, but the people are just selling enterprise licenses upon their glue code and their front ends. So what are we paying for? We're paying for front ends, opinionated glue code, vendor configurations, APIs, workflows, plumbing, fair enough. And 40% are middleware frameworks that are open source, and core libraries are the other 50%. How much do you think of that stuff, of the blue layer, of the open source layer, comes out of Europe? Some numbers, anyone? 40. That's 50. That's pretty good. It's 38.5 right now, as when we look at cloud native. But how much do we buy in our enterprises from especially US vendors? More than 80%. So there's a trade deficit, I would call it, okay? And that's why we need to become a open source first upstream contributing company, and that's why we need members of the board understand these KPIs and decide upon having an OSPO and support the OSPO, but not the one guy that goes to a KubeCon once a year. I'm talking about shared maintainerships, sharing maintainerships, and it has so many benefits and business cases. It's, first of all, transparency raises quality. Obviously, you know that. Pants down, if you share what you do with everybody here in the room, some people will say, okay, Sebastian, that's shit. I get that, but then let's work on it. And that's when you're 10 years in open source, or some of you maybe 20 years, you had that yourself. You were telling people that their stuff is shit, and people were telling that your stuff is shit. It hurts at the beginning, but then it raises quality. So yeah, and peer reviews at scale, bug correction in community, and quality through public scrutiny. That's brutal, but it's good. And there's a free rider problem we currently have. My company did so in the last 30 years. What did they do in open source? Nothing. Literally, absolutely zero. Nothing. And we tend to buy enterprise licenses for something that slows us down. We have 25,000 procured contracts, 25,000 procured contracts of proprietary software that contain mostly open source. How much open telemetry did we buy? In which timeline? Old forks, very old forks, super old forks. And we are the slowest, most common denominator of all these slow development lifecycle managements of these small companies. We're never upstream. But we have 10,000 times open telemetry in some old fork, maintained by somebody who doesn't even care anymore. So that's one thing. Contribution is investment. And you can shape standards, obviously. It also is talent recruiting. And when I say, I have a developer for your project, I want to use your project, I want to have a developer in your project. I give you one maintainer, I give you resource, I give you power, like development power from my company. That's the job of an OSPO. Exchange maintainerships. That's why you should talk to each other. Do you have a project? Do you have a project? Talk to each other. Exchange maintainerships. And obviously, vendor independence. Who's aware of Regis? Who's used it before? Velki was the answer of the community. Very quickly, license stuff, not according to community rules, new product. Fork it, audit it, run it yourself. Right? And it's an easy decision. I go to boards, not only my board, but as you know, we have 900 companies, 3,400 majority shares. I go to a lot of companies that I'm not even aware of, are our company. And then I have to tell them why they should do that, why they should join this. And if you have a member of the board that you might want to have to be convinced by maybe one of the people in the room, talk to each other. And the first step is building an OSPO, setting the legal requirements, contribute actively, and then you can shape and become standards. And it's absolutely no question for us that this is a key factor in successful AI adoption. 97%, remember, 97%. That's 1% more than the 96%, but the numbers, they are matching quite easily. 97% is plumbing. And all the plumbing in the entire world, what is it? It's open source stuff. I don't want to go too far, but everything that brings compute somewhere is open source. So the trillion-dollar hardware industry depends, and the trillion-dollar software industry actually, they depend on an open source layer in between. That's the stuff we do. And there's nothing left but an invitation to do that together. We created one of the biggest OSPOs in Europe right now. We are ready to have full-blown paid maintainers in our company, and we're ready to share them with you guys in obviously using the products and inspiring, hopefully, the entire continent to follow that example and do it together with us. And this is my LinkedIn phishing code. No, just kidding. Just scan it and connect on LinkedIn. And if you need reference architectures, because I've seen so many taking pictures of this abomination of slideware that I did here, and business cases, I do have a tremendous amount of business cases, because you can imagine how much I have to justify in my company about even coming here, right? And if you want to convince your board, creating an OSPO, so you can become a maintainer yourself, send me to them. Whatever, I mean, it costs nothing for you, and maybe they listen to me. I don't know. Anyway, if you need anything, I'm here for another half an hour, and then I have to drive to the next conference. I wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and reach out if you need anything. Have a good one.